fan her system. The situation wasn't good, but it wasn't dire yet. That was the conclusion Commander Redford Kalen reached as he continued to watch the unfolding battle between the Kaestin and Raventomb fleets. He put nearly all his focus on analyzing every front, every tactic, every movement. Even with the Tactical Sixth providing him assistance, it was a daunting task that put his broader commanding capabilities to the test. GVK 990, that most hated simulation and the source of many migraines, gave him some guidance, but no answer. Beyond Fury, the name of that most accursed obstacle that refused to break under his repeated tries, was similar in many ways to the present dilemma before him. He wasn't commanding a dying battleship against a combined, though reduced and damaged, fleet of Yukanti hierarchy and Arabian Commonwealth ships, and he was the one acting as a relief force instead of being the one battling and buying time for reinforcements to arrive to his rescue. But the enemy outnumbered Principality forces, and the enemy leader was as cunning as he was deadly. In reality, the actual battle the simulation was based on had resulted in the loss of the battleship Astor's Will, the flagship of the Astorian Principality, until that engagement. It wasn't truly comparable in terms of magnitude, but the similarities were there. The greatest question was when and where the best moment was to reveal himself. Too early, and it would cause several ships to pounce on the Noir Navio with sheer numbers. Too late meant losing the Kaestin and countless other lives and ships. His objectives were clear, priorities set, but he didn't want to give up either. Kill Raventomb and capture Yazid Kaestin without bringing harm to his niece in all but blood. Directly connected to the tactical display, the aged commander glared as one of the Kaestin scout frigates was overwhelmed and crippled, all but bisected by concentrated laser fire. Shortly after, one of the escort corvettes was destroyed, overwhelmed by fighters that disabled its PD turrets, allowing bombers to turn it into debris. 7 Kaestin ships destroyed to only 3 pirate ones, he said to himself, his hands gripping the armrests tightly. Raventomb's cunning showed clearly against the rigidity of accepted Principality void combat tactics. The fleet, divided into 2 groups, was solid and strong, but it left them vulnerable to attacks coming from various vectors. A tactic that damnable animal was exploiting as his fleet, divided into 5 formations, denied the Kaestin fleet a direct frontal assault. The Royal Navy's doctrine was almost immutable. Change was anathema to a system that had worked for so long and that the vast majority saw as flawless. Those views were carried over to the doctrines employed by noble houses. Few were those who deviated in a significant way from that comfortable set of rules, strategies, and tactics, and all of them only in 1 or 2 areas at most. Trusting true and tested doctrines was a virtue in itself. Basic strategies, command protocols, standard formations, and accepted tactics existed because they were fundamental cornerstones. Yet there was little room for imagination, exploration, and flexibility. It was a rigid system that, while not punishing those traits, rarely rewarded those possessing them. Yazid Kaestin was most definitely not in that category, but she wasn't an incompetent commander either. Through ship movements alone, he was able to decide that she was struggling to direct her ships properly in a large-scale conflict. She likely never had the duty to be in charge of so many ships, less so against a force that turned the odds against her. Another point he could applaud was that she seemed to hold little interest in gaining glory for her name. The disgustingly retrofitted heavy cruiser had yet to move into battle engagement range, but what it was doing was worse. It was acting as bait, blatantly so, and had done so as soon as the real battle commenced. The rest of their heavy hitters led the other 4 formations, the 3 light destroyers and the remaining 6 heavy freighters. The heavy freighters led 2 groups, 3 in each, 2 light destroyers led another, and the smallest of those 4 groups was led by the remaining light destroyer. It pained him to admit it, but Ezkit was clearly a veteran, cunning like a vermin outrunning a predator, and knew his hunting terrain to near-perfect mastery. But he was also a lying, manipulative, deceiving coward at heart. The trap was there, somewhere, but as clear as leaving himself exposed was like an open invitation to his enemies to attack, it simply couldn't be that easy. A pirate corvette was struck by a hail of railguns and plasma cannons, crippling it. Focusing on the external cameras that were extensions of his eyes, he zoomed in as much as he could, tracking trajectories of the ships in the 3rd group. They maintained formation as they continued their assault, turning their guns on several Kahaniyan escort ships. The pirates were coordinated. The movements correlated with those of the tactical display, and together the picture they painted was harrowing. The third pirate group was pressing on the second Kahaniyan formation, harassing with missiles, antiquated mass driver guns, some railgun strikes, and laser fire. Small explosions were happening everywhere as missiles were destroyed in the void by counter-missile strikes, PD turrets, or upon impacting against shields. It was chaotic, organized chaos to be more specific, but it was bound to become even more so soon. Only a few of the pirates' small craft had been deployed so far, a fact that irked him to his core. Why would Raventune not yet deploy his full might? Even if the total amount of Raptor fighters was a fraction of his numbers was enough to bring them to a sensible level of parity. His advantage was clear as a polished mirror. Splitting a fraction of his attention to the Noir Navio, he saw the Reaper's blade acting as a scout at a forward position, while all available 104 fighters were performing escort duty around the assault destroyer. For a split moment he considered contacting Wyatt, but ultimately rebuked the notion. If Wyatt were to glimpse into Esket's mind in order to predict his plans, he'd do so on his own. Pressuring him would only lead to failure or subpar results if any were to be had. In truth, he had no real expectation that Wyatt, unpredictable as he was, could align with the twisted, cruel mentality and through process that guided Raventune's actions. If he could manage it, he'd be most grateful and take his advice to heart. That made him chuckle deeply. Even with the implementation of every tactic born from what he'd seen Wyatt do, he still couldn't beat beyond fury. But he'd gotten closer than ever before after taking the unrelenting brutality that was born from the mind of a humble once-hauler pilot. The revelation that to truly overcome it was to do the unthinkable, a trait beyond his grasp. I'm used up goods now. Doctrine and years of compliance have withered away my imagination, replacing it with a slanted way of thinking. What great cruel irony. My father was right. Once we are set in our ways, it is hard for anyone to change them voluntarily. I've become an old dog, but I can learn new skills and apply them, Redford thought bitterly. He'd never been an imaginative man, at least not enough to be considered a revolutionary thinker. What differentiated him from other pilots was that he was willing to take chances where they mattered and shove away traditional doctrine in favor of following his instincts. Always focused on a goal, not the rewards. Aggressive, cunning, decisive. Those were the traits that had once best described him. He'd never favored the traditional slugging match, as some commoners would describe it, where two opposing forces would enter combat and see who lasted the longest, or until surrender came. His nickname, Vorpal Strike, was telling in so many aspects. Decapitating strikes, decisive one-sided opening volleys, and overwhelming firepower when the enemy least expected it. That was his favorite approach to combat. And yet, despite every victory and achievement earned throughout his long service, he was aware of his limitations. Minutes passed, stretching into eddies of time that felt like slow-ticking hours. The aged commander saw the precise moment things shifted. Yasid Kahaniyan, either driven by impatience or reaching the culmination of her planning, unleashed the first true blow. The tactical display lit up as hundreds of new signatures emerged from both sides, but pointedly, the Kahaniyan fleet fired more than twice as much as the pirates could. It was the start of a massive missile barrage, with the missile boats firing continuously alongside every other ship, creating a veritable deadly swarm. Drones moved forth to intercept as the exchange began, and countermeasures were activated. PD turrets were firing non-stop, trying not to stop the continuous onslaught, but to minimize the damage they would take. Their split formations worked once more in their favor, as the Kahaniyan ships were unable to operate at full effectiveness due to the number of objectives from different attack vectors, which hindered their tracking systems and sensors. It wasn't enough to counter them, but it successfully denied them an advantage that the smaller fleet should possess. Ships from both sides advanced, unleashing kinetic projectiles and lasers with the goal of killing each other. There was no pretense to be found here. Both sides were looking to inflict as much damage as possible upon the other. One pirate freighter was overwhelmed by missiles, unable to stop them, and was destroyed after several of them impacted its hull and destroyed its engines, crippling it. Two more were destroyed not too long after, followed by a frigate and a corvette punctured by a railgun volley as its shield collapsed under the torrent that were the missiles pummeling shields, armor, and hull alike. The first Keistan formation, emboldened by the sudden turn of events, pressed on against the third pirate group led by the two light destroyers, the most evidently dangerous group after Raventomb's flagship, which, even now, refused to join the fight. It had closed in distance but had yet to fire once. At first, the tactic appeared sound, as 3 more freighters were destroyed at the cost of a single frigate, which turned into a miniature star as its core was struck by laser fire. One of the light destroyer's shields collapsed, leaving it vulnerable. Several railgun shots impacted it, but it wasn't destroyed or crippled as it veered off, trying to escape. Torpedoes, likely high-yield fusion or plasma torpedoes, were launched from the few ships equipped with them. That's when Redford saw the trap sprung. As the two Keistan formations drifted apart, their combined firepower was cut off from one another. Instead of 2 parts working together, they were now acting individually. Their cohesion was broken. As missiles continued to fly across the void, brief explosions created by interceptions and counter-detonations, the pirates revealed their hand once the first formation was properly trading blows with the third pirate group. The fourth group, led by the singular light destroyer, moved in closer to support the third, while at the same time, fighters were now joining the fray, leaving their hangars in a veritable deluge of firepower. "No," Redford muttered as everything became clear in his mind. The fighters were moving in to surround both formations, focusing on the first as it too now realized its mistake. That was bad enough, but what followed made his heart skip a beat. The pirate groups began to break apart. At first, he didn't understand why, but as they began to move around the Keistan formations, denying them the chance to properly focus fire on one ship without leaving themselves wide open to attacks on other vectors. It gave them an easier opening to take down incoming missiles while their fighters worked on disabling their torpedoes with haywire mines. The first formation fought back with all its might, every available Raptor moving to intercept the pirate small craft. 2 more pirate freighters were destroyed, outmatched by Royal Navy-grade weaponry. Half a dozen ships lost their shield, taking damage but refusing to stop now that their prey was theirs. It was only a matter of time before the line cruiser acting as the fleet's flagship was destroyed. The heavy destroyer and its accompanying 6 destroyers did all they could. Still, as pirate fighters and gunships countered the barrage of missiles, they only opened themselves up further to the enemy. One of the destroyers was overwhelmed by small craft, giving bombers the opening to come in and destroy the beautiful ship. Explosions tore holes in the ship's hull, venting atmosphere until its superstructure broke apart, splitting it into several pieces. Its engines died as it became nothing more than debris that collided against one corvette, unable to veer away in time. The corvette was struck, the impact collapsing its weakened shields and tearing a huge gash on its starboard. Finally, the running light destroyer turned around, firing its railgun and laser turrets with the intent of annihilating its target, a patrol frigate. Gunships joined in, striking at it to collapse its shields until, with a flicker of dying hope, they were gone. Railgun strikes pierced through it and lasers impacted armor, melting it almost instantly as it cut through the hull. The frigate powered down and became debris. Escape pods were launched from the crippled ships and subsequently cut down by pirate fighters. There would be no mercy on display, no thirst for capture, no desire for plunder. Boarding pods were launched in retaliation by the Keistan forces, but there were simply too many enemy fighters ready to intercept them. Raptor squadrons fought as best they could. At first, they were able to withstand the enemy's small craft. Yet it soon became an impossible task as the pirates turned their drones into shields and battering rams that took the pilots by surprise, turning an otherwise semi-balanced engagement into a slaughter as the kill ratio became closer to 1-to-1 instead of 4 or 5-to-1 according to his worst statistical predictions. With a thought, Redford reached into the ship's network and contacted Clara. "Clara, they're going after Yazid Kaistan's flagship. They want to break their morale and leadership as quickly as possible. We must intervene now if you want to capture her." Her reply was nearly instantaneous. "Our priority is Raventomb this day. However, I cannot deny that, as great a threat as that man projects, we must act in accordance with what's best for the Principality's stability and future. You have my permission to intervene, Commander Redford." Make the enemies of the Raven know fear. With permission granted, Redford reached into the ship's systems, opening the torpedo pods. Simultaneously, he contacted Wyatt. Wyatt, we're going to engage Raventomb's forces and rescue Yacid Caiston before the pirates destroy her flagship. We need her alive. Tell me, have you discerned anything about Ezket's planning capabilities? No, Commander. I'm sorry. I've never seen anything like this, records, movies, simulations, or otherwise. However, and forgive me if I'm wrong about this, but I believe Raventomb's forces aren't relying on Ezket's direct intervention, Wyatt replied. Redford frowned slightly. What do you mean by that, Wyatt? I'm not certain myself, Commander. But the way the groups move and operate, it's more like they are acting independently but with a leash on their necks. Ezket's flagship has yet to join the battle along with its escorts. I think Ezket is there to prevent his forces from breaking off, almost as if he's less a leader and closer to a banner to rally around, answered Wyatt tentatively. The gray-haired man narrowed his eyes, realizing that his second-in-command was right. He'd been too focused on the unfolding events to consider anything else. Yet another failing, he thought tiredly. Well done, Wyatt. If you discern anything else, no matter how trivial, contact me without hesitation. Good hunting, Wyatt. You may engage the enemy at your discretion. Go now, Wolfhound. Let your fury be deployed, Redford ordered, ending the link right after. On the tactical display, he saw every fighter peeling away from the Nornavio, burning fast to reach the bewildered Yacid Caiston. Next, he contacted the Reaper's Blade. Lieutenant Commodore Donato Lintar, advance. Engage targets of opportunity at maximum distance. Focus on the fourth group. Utilize Stapleyan assaults. Do not engage in full until you receive further orders. It shall be done as you've ordered, Commander Kalen, replied Donato respectfully. Launch torpedoes, ordered Redford, feeling and seeing two large, long cylinders exit from their tubes. They didn't close. Instead, 30 seconds later, 2 more torpedoes were launched, followed by 4 more in little over a minute. 8 torpedoes in total, 11 high-yield fusion torpedoes remained, and the singular antimatter torpedo that remained from the Battle of Hastrung. It wasn't nearly close to enough, but he'd make do. As the torpedoes advanced, Redford ordered Galt Tyrone to issue a general combat-ready warning, doing a final check of the ship's systems. As a fighter pilot, old habits were the hardest to overcome. Satisfied with the result, he prepared himself to unleash a quick barrage of Stapleyan assaults, targeting the 2 light destroyers in the third group primarily. The sudden appearance of the torpedoes, at least as seen by the pirates' sensors, rattled them, leaving them wondering where they had come from. Direct the first torpedo volley at their flagship. Direct second and third volleys at Group 4. Direct the fourth volley at the third group. Target those damnable corvettes harassing the line cruiser, he ordered, calm and focused, allowing experience and focus to guide him. A chorus of "Yes, Commander!" barely reached his attention as he focused on the battle at hand. Adjusting course, Redford accelerated, feeling the strain increasing yet advancing undeterred. Making quick calculations with the aid of his personnel and the tactical AI, he aligned his railguns and fired a volley. 5 seconds later, he fired again and then a third time. 30 seconds later, they reached their objectives. The first railgun volley struck a frigate whose shields, already severely weakened, couldn't repel the impact and collapsed, having 2 strikes pierce it, heavily damaging it. The second volley struck a freighter, puncturing its core and creating a short-lived orb of plasma. The third volley missed 2 of its shots, but the 2 that landed managed to collapse the wavering shields of a corvette. The heavy laser turrets adjusted themselves with precision before firing. The frigate, already damaged, had its command bridge turned to slag. The corvette, in a desperate attempt to evade any following volley, had begun to veer off, leaving its underbelly exposed. Its core was breached, but it didn't explode. Instead, it began to vent heated plasma as it turned into a floating hulk. 2 more freighters had their engines destroyed, torn asunder and disabled, leaving the ships alive but crippled. The sudden assault broke the cohesion of the 2 groups, further increasing the confusion they were already suffering. Simultaneously, the first torpedo volley had been intercepted and disabled by gunships. The second and third volleys were being assaulted by numerous fighters trying to bring them down. At the loss of one, Redford decided to trigger the remote detonation on the remaining 3 torpedoes. The powerful yield of 120 megatons from each torpedo illuminated the void momentarily, destroying only a few drones and pirate fighters. But the EMP was strong enough that many of the pirate small craft were disabled. They were also too far away to affect any enemy ships, except perhaps to interfere with their sensors and weaken their shields, but the Kasten forces were in no real danger. The fourth volley, however, was his real goal. The Stapleyan assaults were successful in the majority of cases, hitting the light destroyers with haywire mines. The two ships' engines died out, their signatures growing fainter as they drifted through space. The torpedoes hit them mere seconds later, creating two brief orbs of intense white light. Before they faded, Redford locked target and fired another railgun volley, hitting a bewildered corvette, destroying it. When the light destroyers reappeared, huge gaps were visible on their hulls, the edges flowing with an intense white splendor that would slowly cool. Yazid Kasten's formation, equally as surprised by the sudden arrival of reinforcements, redoubled their efforts upon seeing the destruction and pushed back against the pirate menace. The pirates, now seeing the Noir Navio on their sensors, didn't break into a disarray at the loss of two of their light destroyers. Redford had expected such an outcome. For as long as Ezket Adante remained polluting the air with each of his miserable breaths, they would continue to fight, even if they were shaken. They had saved Yazid Kasten's formation, but the second formation remained surrounded and isolated. If he were to break away now, the pirates would pounce on Yazid's ships, and he couldn't allow that to happen. It pained him, but he'd let the second formation fend for themselves. Once he secured Yazid's safety, Raven Tomb's flagship remained to be dealt with. "Commander, we're receiving a communication request from Captain Yazid Kasten." "Marked as urgent," Galt informed. "Patch it through audio only," Redford replied. A moment later, he heard labored breathing, then the woman's voice came to life. "Who are you?" "I wasn't expecting any further reinforcements." "Has Lord Andrew sent you?" "Identify yourself immediately," ordered Yazid with a firm tone. "You will hold your tongue, Kasten Kerr, for you lack the authority to speak to me in such a manner of disrespect. Less so in the obtuse belief that you may make demands," Redford replied, staunch, firm, and displaying his full authority. "Before you stands Commander Redford Kalen, loyal to the legitimate prince. If I've deigned myself to assist your treacherous lives, Kasten, it is merely by the will of Astor's blood and the mercy bestowed by Her Majesty, the second princess of the Astorian Principality, Princess Clara," he exclaimed loudly and proudly. Though time was of the essence, and he'd rather be blunt with his words, the necessity to impart to the woman the full weight of what and who she was dealing with was necessary. As he waited for her reply, he noticed that Wyatt and his fighters had not made for a frontal assault as he'd expected. Far from it, in fact, Wyatt, in a move that would have shocked him under other circumstances, was attacking the fourth group. No, not attacking. They were pulverizing it. The leading light destroyer was spinning aimlessly with huge chunks of its superstructure missing, the clear result of tactical mines. Pirate small craft were being completely annihilated. Freighters, frigates, and corvettes were being overwhelmed as Kasten's weapons trained their weapons upon them, and their fighters joined those under Wyatt's command, seeking guidance from their unlikely allies. Before he could question how he'd done it, the answer became evident as Wyatt had taken advantage of the previously detonated torpedoes to mask their arrival, taking them by surprise. "It would seem I must extend a formal apology, Commander Kalen," Yazid Kasten replied amicably, her voice still agitated but as respectful as she could manage it. "I thank you for your prompt assistance, and now I beseech your aid in order to eliminate this scourge from the system." "Will you aid? Name your price. If it is within my power to grant it, I will. This I swear in the name and honor of House Kasten." "We will discuss payment at another time, Captain," Redford replied, thanking whatever deity would hear him for the fortune of stumbling across a sensible Kasten. Regardless, he wasn't going to take any chances by trusting traitors so easily. This foe is not part of the ongoing succession dispute. Rather, he endangers the entire principality with its mere existence. The Noir Navio shall assist you. We welcome Her Majesty's help and the firepower of the Noir. What? The Noir Navio in kind. We will press on, Commander. Let loyalty be its own reward, Yazid said, and the connection ended. Lieutenant Commodore Donato, you have my permission to engage. Support our fighters, he gave the direct command without room for a reply. The battle continued with him maintaining a respectable distance between the Noir Navio and the rest of the fleets. Yazid's promise was one thing, but trusting a Kaistan to not backstab them in the middle of battle was not something he was willing to gamble on. Just as he fired a railgun volley aimed at a frigate and the ship's PD turrets came to life to ward off dozens of missiles, he saw Raventomb's group on the tactical map starting to move as the retrofitted cruiser began to pour out its own barrage of missiles heading toward Yazid's formation. Then, he received a communication from Wyatt, his voice firm, excited but not desperate, and vibrating with confidence. Commander, he's trying to pin you to the battle. He'll either try to escape or move to eliminate the rest of the Kaistan fleet. He must be stopped before any of that happens. Go, Commander! We'll finish off these filthy pirates and rejoin you as soon as possible. A subordinate ordering his superior officer what to do. Oh, Joseph Cornelius! The irony hurts my aching heart, Redford thought, with a sad, distant, yet satisfied smile, as he issued the mental command to change course and give chase to Raventomb and his flagship.
Looking for more? The latest chapters of The Black Ship, The Human from a Dungeon, Terran Contact, and loads more are all on Vox 9, a new audiobook platform I've built for independent authors. 95% of the content is free, so go check it out now at vox9.io.